Let's get the screen sharing going. How's everybody doing this morning? We appreciate you guys stopping by for a little bit of time to continue this journey into the new commission structure that the proposed NAR settlement is bestowing upon us. And so we're today going to be talking about buyer representation agreements. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. I don't know where my chat went, but we'll figure that out. Judy had a question regarding if the list had been updated yet in RSA. Kelly, do you know the answer to that?
I thought it had been uploaded, but there maybe wasn't a save button hit, and that would be my fault. So let me see about getting that. I'll get it uploaded even while we're on here today.
Okay, fantastic. I can't see the chat, so Mark, you're driving that at this point. If I find it, I'll jump on in that too. But for today, we're going to kind of do a quick review over what we talked about on Monday. And then we're going to kind of dive a little bit deeper into that BCA form, the Broker Compensation Advisory, because it's an opportunity or a tool that you can use to explain kind of what's going on to your clients, both the sellers and the buyer, because it's in both bundles. Then we're going to look at the buyer representation agreements. Yes, plural agreements, because there's two versions, a short version, which is the PSRA, the property showing and representation agreement, and then the BRBC, which we're all familiar with, and we'll take a look at kind of what's changed there. And then we'll just kind of move into open discussion. It's a reasonably lot to cover. Same preface as last time. We're doing the best of our abilities to make this the most up-to-date and accurate information that we can provide. Both Mark and I were on the town hall that Gov Hutchison had yesterday with California Association of Realtors. And you know, the changes are everything's kind of in flux. And so that's why we say the information presented here is subject to change. What we're not going to talk about today yet, this is for Friday, is the purchase agreement related forms and the revisions there and how everything integrates. We want to stay focused on the buyer side today, but before we dive into that, we'll kind of touch on some of the listing agreement stuff and finish that up. And then again, relevant questions that we can't answer, we'll research and answer on Friday. And believe it or not, there's even some questions that Carr isn't even quite able to answer yet. So a couple quotes, something to ponder as we go into this this time of change in our industry. There's nothing permanent except for change. Intelligence is the ability to adapt to change, and change is inevitable. Growth is optional, and that's, I think, pretty adept here from the standpoint, or applicable here, because you know, this is an opportunity for growth for all of us, and you either embrace it and you run with it, or you know, you push back on it, and the reality is it's changing one way or another. Kind of getting back to the Phil Dunphy theme, I hopefully can play this. I guess it won't play in play. Oh, here we go. Phil from Modern Family. Volume up real quick.
Why would you buy a home without a realtor? Would you canoe without a life jacket? Would you ride on the back of a motorcycle without hanging on tight to your girlfriend? I'm your girlfriend.
Phil Dunphy, to me, kind of encapsulates the essence of a lot of real estate agents. A little bit corny, but also, you know, just a pretty cool guy. So I think the point of that was that you guys just being here, you guys are like a life jacket to your sellers and buyers. You guys are the safety net, and that's what's so great about you spending a little bit of time getting yourself educated, getting yourself sharpened, so that you're able to get out into the industry and succeed and excel. So moving into some other additional information, I actually already put in the chat the link to the recording that Kelly was referring to. And then I'll just hit this link and see what happens. Wanted to also show you on the Carr website some of the stuff that this is where we're getting a good amount of our resources. And I think this is a good place for you guys to go as well, where a lot of the different documents that we're going to be showing you are here. There's the town hall signups and legal live webinars that you can sign up for here. There is actually a town hall. Where'd it go?
I think there's one right now, actually.
Is it right now? I thought there was one Friday, but anyway, I'm probably in the wrong spot, but spend some time exploring this. And
Well, that one, Bill, the one you were just on, that's
Yeah.
all the recorded ones.
right.
So anybody can watch, and they're all primarily the same. There's different attorneys doing them, so it's a little different take, but for the most part, all the same. And all of the recorded ones are on that site. So you can go back and pick any day and watch it at night or whatever type of thing. They're primarily the same. The one yesterday Gov Hutchinson did was really just on the BRBC for the most part. Well, just through the buyer thing. He went through about 4 or 5 forms. So that, to me, if you haven't seen Gov Hutchinson, who's been with Carr for 40 years, as one of the lead attorneys, he's a pretty sharp guy and he's pretty down to earth. When that one's out, that one's pretty good. And he's doing another one on Friday, I think. Same thing. They're all doing them like every day, as much as possible till through August. So
Can you
Friday
just
right
say
here.
again
Yeah.
what category this is under on car?
say again.
Let me
On
back-
car, how do you find these?
Transaction Center,
Yep,
standard forms,
okay,
Yeah.
forms revisions and new form releases is
Okay.
I'm pretty sure
Thanks.
that's where I'm going. Let's see what we've got here. It's buried,
I know, I hate that they do
Yeah,
that.
they don't make.
Okay,
but that's how I got to it. One other thing I can do for you, since I found chat, is put the link right there in the chat. So you can copy and paste that onto something there. Another thing I wanted to actually go to, let's put this back, is Inman. Think you got to be careful about the sources of information that you take in on this topic, because there is so much. You've got, all these different classes and webinars and all these types of things that you can attend. There's just so many different perspectives. I would suggest, and I think Mark would agree, that stick with CAR and maybe stick a little bit with your MLS and the opinions and perspectives they're providing, because they're going to be a bit of a guiding light for us. And I say that because they're the ones that are in more direct contact with the plaintiffs on this settlement, with the Department of Justice. And so they're sort of like a captain sitting at the helm of a ship. And that position in that ship is always very high up on the ship, because it has the greatest vantage point into the horizon of what's coming towards them, what's coming towards us. We're below deck, or we're on the sitting by the pool or whatever on the ship. We can't see what they can see. And getting back to something that Gov has said, is that based upon the legal landscape they see ahead of us, the recommendations that they're putting forth, that there's not going to be any broker sharing moving forward, is their position. And it's again what they're seeing from a much higher position than the agents and all the quote unquote influencers out there might see. And so I wanted to take a look at something that was in this article, not going through the whole thing, but how is a buyer's agent's work going to change after August 17th? And it's the biggest thing that's going to change with the buyer's agent. It's going to be the need, number one, to be properly trained and skilled in the communication about transactions and understanding value, in addition to the things we buyer agents always do, which is emotional support, marriage counselor, friend, confident, blah, 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 blah. Here's the thing that's going to change a lot. and that is you're going to have to get a buyer representation agreement signed, and that's what we're talking about today. You're going to have to be able to demonstrate your value. You're going to have to be able to then set your pricing of what you charge consistent with what value you bring to the transaction. You're going to need to be able to explain to your buyer how the current process has changed and how you can expect to include your fee in an offer so that the seller continues to pay your fee, just like historically has been done for decades. You're going to have to develop these skills. You're going to have a presentation. You're going to have data. And so that's what you're here for. That's what's so great about you being present in this training is you're doing exactly what Ed is talking about here. So you need to realize that this is going to be subject to price competition. Make sure that you're setting a fee that you're charging that's consistent with what your skill level is, your value proposition, the services you're going to provide, and don't be concerned about whether other people charge or what's being offered. The next thing you need to realize right away as a buyer's agent is you don't need any help from the listing agent to decide on what's being offered or anything like that. Go show every single property, open every door your buyer wants to see these that they're qualified for, and make an offer on every single property. And what he's saying here is you don't need to call the listing agent and ask how much the seller's willing to offer for a commission. Just get out there and show houses and start writing offers. And right here is where I think it's good advice. And every offer that I make, this is again, Ed Zorn from CRMLS, he's the general counsel. Every offer that I make this day forward, it's going to say seller shall pay Ed Zorn Realty X%, in my case, 2% of the purchase price of closing. Now, that's going to be part of a different form. It's not going to be specifically written on the CAR form, the purchase agreement. But anyway, his point is, he's just, this is the direction he's going. This is what he's going to do. Ed is also a broker. So he's not concerned about getting paid. It will be part of the transaction just like it is today. And what he's also said is it is very much like how commercial operates every day. And that's why he's very confident that this is going to work fine. And there was one last thing I wanted to find real quickly for you. And that is that he says that by the time we get to January, people are going to look backwards and go, that really wasn't that big of a deal. A lot of hoopla, a lot of hand wringing, a lot of, oh my God, what are we going to do? But once you see the forms and you get the forms, and if the forms are crafted properly, you get an understanding of the forms, the system will naturally flow because people will use the forms to help educate and inform their consumer, and that will drive the practice. So anyway, this for me is a reason that we just want to continue down the road that CAR has paved for us, stick with them through this and keep moving forward, learn the forms, and just keep rolling. So as a quick review, you want to just run through these bullet items real quick, Mark? This is what we did Monday. No?
Bill,
Sir.
should we bring up what we talked about this morning a little bit about the other brokerages, or wait for that for later?
Well, that's coming. What I was asking you to do is just read these bullet points that are on the screen about the proposed NAR settlement basic terms that were part of our discussion on Monday.
Okay. So that
I got it. NAR will pay $418 million to this class from this settlement that's going on over the past 4 years. Publishing and sharing of commission on the MLS is prohibited. MLS participants must have a written buyer broker agreement with buyers prior to showing and touring properties. And then there's a release for real estate agents like us. This was gone over in more detail on Monday. In terms of Department of Justice, they've been very clear that they want to eliminate sellers from paying buyer agent commission, and the commission sharing type stuff. And that the DOJ has been in contact with CAR, and the current contract documents that we have are under Department of Justice review, which gets back to what I was talking about earlier, that CAR specifically has a much more in-depth view of what's going on behind the scenes than any of us. And so that's why they're saying this is the direction we want to go. And regardless of your opinion of the Department of Justice's authority or overstepping their authority, you know, this is where we're going with it. Quick dates you needed to know. We went over July 24th, revision of the revised documents were issued to us. That's what we're going to talk about today. Then SDO MLS is removing the CBB from the MLS on the 12th of August. And if you are a North San Diego County Association member, a PSR Association member, a South Riverside Association member, CRMLS is removing the CBB on the 13th. And then the 17th is when the terms of the settlement go into effect. Again, check out the recording if you want to get more details on all that. We also talked about the revised listing agreement bundle. And these are all the forms that are in the bundle now. They have 2 new forms, and we're going to take a harder look real quick on this broker compensation form. Let's see if I can pull it up right here. I'll just do it this way. Working off three monitors again. The reason I wanted to kind of highlight this again is that we kind of skimmed over it last time, and in the town hall with Gov, he kind of said the same thing that we said, and that was that this is a form that explains what's going on. And so and it can be used with your buyers and sellers. It's in both bundles, and this is basically saying how you can discuss things with your buyers and sellers that are on this form. That's what it's used as a guide. And talking about written buyer representation, how do I explain the various ways in which the buyer broker can get compensated, which is in paragraph 3, how I can discuss changing practices regarding compensation. That has kind of the historical overview. So I just put a link to that, and that's in the chat. And then this is the actual form itself. And again, this is part of both the listing agreement bundle and the buyer representation broker compensation bundle.
Yeah,
So,
all these forms and advisories and are all in the on the CAR website. You've been getting emails, if you read the emails from the president of CAR and all that stuff, then some of them are linked in there. So Bill's got the link to this one, but there's others in there as well. There was a couple the other day that were pretty good as well. So just it's all on the CAR site.
being asked for links, so I need one of my pages back. So Judy is asking for the letters to be bigger. I realize that on a phone, this is probably hard to see. Let's see. There was a request for the Inman link. So here we go with that right now. You got to be a member of that, though, to be able to access it, I believe. So kind of diving right into the revised compensation agreement. But before I do that, I wanted to show one thing, and that is we had this discussion on Monday. If I did this right, I should be able to go right here. This is the listing side of the MLS, and this is CRMLS. And so you can see this is like the very top of the input page. If we go down to just below price, line number 6 or whatever the reference number is, seller consider concessions, and it's a yes or no option. Mark was saying that this actually was a little bit different on Monday, and it's been changed again, that there was actually a number you could put in there.
Right, there was 6, and there was another field, number 1, and there was something, I don't know if anybody looked at it or not, but there was 2 fields on Monday, and now there's 1 field.
So this is basically where you would, based upon an answer on the MLSA, which we talked about on Monday, you would answer yes or no. Now, comparing this to SDLMLS, I don't have that up right now, but I did look at SDMLS for SDR members. I'm not seeing this field there yet. And that's where this gets a little bit convoluted, is different MLSs are doing different things at different times. And not all MLSs are going to have this field considering concessions, yes or no. So anyway, I wanted to show that before we got too far down the road. So let's kind of take a look at the bundle real quick. And I kind of need this here so I can get to documents quickly. Or does I'll just do that? Is that hopefully a little bit better? It's a little bigger. So this starts the bundle for the BRBC. We got the agency disclosure, which we're all used to. We got this, what's that?
Bill, can we go over just real quick, just go over the first line of the agency disclosure, just as a reminder of what this is kind of all about?
Go for it.
It is right there, stop seller's agent. As a reminder, a lot of this having to do with the commission and sharing and not seeing it in the MLS has a reasonable amount to do with agents steering people to higher commissions for themselves and not necessarily the best deal for their client. And we are all salespeople, and that's kind of the way it works. But we work in an industry that's a little different than selling cars or refrigerators. And so that's why we're kind of in the middle of what's going on with the Department of Justice. They generally don't really care about people selling cars or refrigerators, but they do care about people selling houses, apparently. And one of the reasons is this. So just remember, seller's agent, a diligent exercise of reasonable skill and care in performance of your duties, honest and good faith dealing, basically doing what's best for your client and not what's best for you. And that's the same kind of agency that exists if you were an agent for somebody, an actor or sports or whatever. You have a responsibility to the client to get the best deal possible for them. And that's where this all kind of goes back to. So kind of keep that in mind with, why this is happening, is that this is one of the reasons. People are not really paying attention to this and looking for the highest commissions and not the best deal for their clients. Now that the commissions can't be seen, you're going to make the transaction is going to be between you and your client, being the buyer. You come up with what you deserve to get paid, and then you ask the seller to pay it. So that's part of the reason we're doing what we're doing.
And we see the buyer agent has the same
selling agent, seller's agent, buyer's agent.
It's verbatim the same for buyer side.
Right.
So again, agency disclosure, then we'll come back to this buyer representation agreement real quick, just because I want to show you the other documents. And the other thing they did is they shifted the main agreement further up in the bundle. There was complaints that it was these listing agreements and purchase agreement, all of them were buried beneath all these advisories and stuff like that. And so they shifted it to right after the agency disclosure, because the agency disclosure needs to be signed before any other agreements signed. But BIA, which we're familiar with, is part of the bundle. And here's that BCA that we just talked about, which we went over also on Monday. This again is a form that you'll be able to use as a tool to kind of explain what's going on and how this all works. I think it's super helpful. And then the PRBS we're familiar with, which deals with dual agency and representation, and then the CCPA, and that should be it for all that. So let's go back up to the top, because we want to dig into the buyer representation agreement. And Gov did a real nice job yesterday with the town hall talking about this. And Mark, jump in whenever you want to kind of mess around or throw some comments in, but
Okay.
We're looking mainly at paragraph 2. They went to the grid like the purchase agreement and like the listing agreement. 2A1 representation period, very easy to find and see, so that should be pretty straightforward. And then 2A2 is kind of important, because the default for this form is that it's a non-exclusive agreement, meaning that a buyer can enter into this agreement, and then enter into another non-exclusive agreement with another buyer agent, and if that agent shows them the house they buy, you know, you're out of luck. But it also can be exclusive by checking this box, and then you had mentioned something I didn't check up on, but in the back page there was also initial that needed to be done. Did you ever see that initial, Mark? It's like paragraph, oh, it's right here, exclusive
Yeah.
representation. You got an initial right here. So just make sure that both of those are done. If you don't have the initials here, you don't have exclusive representation according to CAR. So,
Real quick,
property-
so we don't miss it later on. So the exclusive to cancel it, which we'll get to, I guess, but I just want to make sure we don't miss it. Canceling the exclusive is 30-day notice. Canceling non-exclusive is immediate. So if you have a non-exclusive agreement, the buyer can say, I've had enough of you, we're canceling this agreement like right now. If you have an exclusive, they have to do it in writing, it has to be wait 30 days. So just keep that in mind. And these contracts are only good for 90 days. There's no 6 months, 12 months representation. It's 90 days, period, on this one. If you want to redo another one after that, you can, but these are only good for 90 days. And in case the question comes up, these are good for the entire brokerage. So if somebody does one with me and I say, hey, Bill, can you go show a house for me today because I'm not available? He doesn't need to get another one for himself. He can just use the one that's already active.
And if the buyer is a corporation, LLC, or partnership, that 90-day limit does not apply.
Yeah.
And you are allowed to modify this document to extend the term. I believe it's another 90 days. So it's not like 90 days and done. You have the ability to extend. That's not a problem.
You can extend them and
3-month
get a
increments.
new one or do whatever. Yeah.
So another thing Gov talked about yesterday was sort of the importance of kind of calling out the type of property and the location, that kind of thing. And that these need to be filled out. You can't leave them blank. And so the default is single family residential, which includes condominiums, manufactured homes. So that's pretty broad, but there's other opportunities and choices here. And then location, you know, should be reasonably specific, like San Diego County and perhaps some of the cities. His point about the being specific is that at least from a buyer's standpoint, if they say it's San Diego County and then they go buy in Orange County, this buyer representation agreement doesn't apply. So you don't have any recourse if they go and do that. So they could have an exclusive with you in San Diego County and have an exclusive with somebody else in Orange County, and that would be considered acceptable. So just sort of some stuff to know in that regard. There's some additional forms that they attached, and I'll show those to you in a little bit, but this buyer identification of preferences and priorities, a BIPP, is one of those forms. It's not required, but it's sort of to help agents and buyers get specific with what the buyer is really looking for. And so that's something that can be added, and then some additional description here. Amount of compensation, it's kind of like there's two main things that need to be in here in addition to this 2E. Broker compensations are not fixed by law, and that's in our listing agreement as well. But it needs to have a term, and it needs to have a fee, and it can't be a wishy-washy fee. It's got to be specific, whatever percentage you're talking about, or a flat fee, or whatever it is. On Monday, Steve Richard had a question about the attached compensation schedule. I think this actually allows for you to create a schedule that might be hourly or whatever it might be, whatever is agreed to between you and the buyer. That's I think what that's for. And what we had said about that is, if you're going to go down that road, to check in with broker support, just to kind of get a second set of eyes looking at that. But the key piece to compensation when it comes to the buyer representation agreement is that whatever percentage you put here and negotiate, that's the most you're going to be able to get out of this particular, whatever transaction this buyer goes into. Mark, did you want to explain that a little bit, or?
Sorry, I was typing.
Okay, you're in chat. I'll keep going, no problem.
Oh, the rate, yeah. So basically, it's a little bit, this again comes down to how much you negotiate, or how well you negotiate, or how much you think your services are worth, or your buyer thinks how much your services are worth, and that's what you come to as an agreement. And it might be a percentage, might be a flat fee, and whatever that is, that's it. If the seller is paying more than that, you're compensated what's on this form. So if you're, thinking you are worth, whatever your services might be, 3%, 5%, 2%, whatever it is, that's the maximum you can get paid no matter what the seller's offering.
That was the key. That's what you need to take away when it comes to this compensation piece is that if the seller offers 3% or something, and you've only put 2% here,
Right.
2% what you're going to get. And as I understood it a while ago, that extra 1% goes to the buyer. And I'm not sure if that's still the case, but that's what they were contemplating early on.
So I'm getting a lot of questions about the PSRA. So just real quick, the PSRA is like
We're going to get there.
We're
Yeah,
gonna do
we're
that
gonna
later,
get there.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. It's like
Um,
a junior, whatever, a
It's
light.
like a smaller version. It's a
Right,
lot
it's
easier
like
and quicker.
Right, the
Let me-
buyer broker light, and it's only for 3 houses only. That's the difference, but we'll get into that in a sec. So I'll answer all those questions as we go along.
What I'm trying to do is I wanted to talk more about broker involved properties, and there is a form that I pulled up that I gotta find real quick. Let's try this right here. And I'll put this link. Again, all this was on that original page that we provided, but oh, this isn't it. Sorry. Let me go back. We already talked about BCA. There's another form. Right here. Nope, let me put this link in. What does broker involvement mean? Right here, number 6. Let's look at that real quick and then we'll go back to the BRBC. Broker involvement means any of the following. The buyer physically entered and was shown the property by the broker. The broker showed the property to the buyer virtually through video conference or walkthrough, sort of like FaceTiming or something. The broker submitted to the seller a signed written offer from the buyer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain an option on the property. The broker performed a market analysis related to the property or reviewed the property specific documents or disclosures with the buyer, where the property was introduced to the buyer by the broker, where the property was one for which the broker acted on the buyer's behalf. Now, with those 6 bullet items, there is this caveat that merely sending a buyer a list of properties is not deemed broker involvement. So in other words, if you put somebody on a mailing for a search out of the MLS and a property that they end up buying comes up in the search and they bought it with another broker, you did not have broker involvement. That's what this caveat is saying. You have to do more than just send them the property. And so anyway, where that applies is in the paragraph we're looking at now. Payments received by broker from seller or others. Actually, 2E3. 2E2 is what we just talked about in regards to the commission, that you're not going to get more than what you said here. 2E3 is the continuation period where after this expires or after it's canceled, you can have so many calendar days for which you have a continuation period. And that broker involved property criteria is is applied. So for example, if you have shown a property to a buyer this week, and your buyer representation agreement expires next week, or they cancel next week, and then they following week, and you do the cancellation properly, document this property you showed them, which we'll get into in a second. And then they, the following week, go write an offer for that property with another broker. You have a certain right to payment through the broker involved properties portion of this agreement under 2E3. And then there's also cancellation, and they've got a special cancellation form, but the broker involved properties still applies.
Right, this is kind of the procuring cause kind of, think of it in those terms, but it's a little more specific because now we have stuff in writing. It's not gonna be a fight as much over, well, I showed them that, I didn't do this. I mean, now since everybody's gonna have a signed buyer broker agreement, which we didn't have in the past, it could be less fighting about who's the procuring cause. So, in car ethic, in NAR ethics, it's 8 pages about procuring, what a procuring cause really is, or how you get paid, if you deserve to get paid. Now it's a little more specific because you're going to have a list of houses you've shown, you have signed agreements and all this kind of stuff. So, you have an exclusive agreement with people, could make things a little bit less subjective and more, hey, it's in writing type of thing. But we'll see how that goes.
And so 2G1, moving on to buyer financial information. This is another form they've created. And I think right now we'll take a look at both the BIPP and this BFPI form, just because it'll be helpful to see them. And then we'll get into that 2G2 thing in regards to the buyer having enough money. So let me dig up. Here's the buyer financial and personal information form. And I've actually got conflicting information on this because one quick sheet that I showed you right here on item 15 talks about the BFPI, and it's asking if it's required. Here they're saying yes, it's required and every buyer should provide one, and that they should be providing it within 5 days. It requires the buyer to provide relevant and personal information, including proof of funds needed to complete the purchase and satisfy the obligation to pay the broker, pre-qualify and all of that. And the thing is, though, is if they don't provide it, your recourse as the buyer broker is to cancel the agreement. And I'm not sure you want to do that. So I'm not sure about the requirement piece. And yesterday with Gov, it was asked if it's required and he said it's not. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of show you that. And now I can't get this out of here. So we're just going to click over and hope for the best. But you can see it's got a lot of personal information about funds and accounts and lender information, financial information, personal information, all that kind of stuff. And I think this is an intention by the forms committee to try to protect us as agents, to make sure that the buyer's legitimate and stuff. I feel like there is an argument or position to take that maybe that's something the lender does, and that the lender's pre-approval incorporates a lot of this stuff, and that relying on that might be sufficient. With HomeSmart, we haven't kind of come to a conclusion as to what the policy is going to be at this point. This is not required, as I understand, or isn't contemplated, but we need to have further conversations internally before we come to a final decision. But this is kind of what that form looks like. And then previously we talked about this BIPP form, and this is just to kind of drill down with the buyer, what are you looking for? It's almost like a checklist that a lot of agents use within their brokerage, like a brokerage specific checklist, but they're looking for a single family, how many bedrooms, square footage, single story, just all those kinds of things. It can't hurt to fill it out. And it can't hurt to take on a meeting with with the buyer. Whether solar, if school panels are on the house, if school district's important, all those kind of different things. So anyway, that's what the BIPP is. So I just want to, at this point, show you kind of what these forms look like. So you have familiarity as we kind of get into the discussion about the next step in the buyer agreement is whether the buyer even has the money to pay the broker. And that is, I'm trying not to scroll up too fast and make you dizzy. Right here, if the buyer has or does not have sufficient funds. And then this gets into the loan product, which, as we talked about on Monday, and Mark can elaborate if you'd like to, but FHA and VA have kind of come along with this process and aren't making it as much of an issue regarding a buyer having the potential to pay commission. But in the event that the buyer does not have sufficient funds and this box is checked, we're going to check out paragraph 9B in the text itself, because that talks about if that box is checked, that the buyer agrees to include a term in the buyer's offer requesting the seller to compensate the buyer broker. And that for the purposes of the transaction, this agreement is contingent on the seller or others agreeing to pay the broker the full amount that's contractually obligated here to the broker. So anyway, that's kind of where that's going, is that the buyer's agreeing that if they don't have sufficient funds, they're understanding that we're going to have to make that request, which is, according to Ed Zorn, going to be the normal request anyway. So in some respects, is this card just covering all the bases and all the potential scenarios, which is what attorneys tend to do. I think we can go over the cancellation form, I suppose, right now, and then we can jump into the PSRA. Does that make sense, Mark?
Yeah.
Because that's pretty much the
well,
grid.
we can talk about, let's talk about the financial thing real quick again, because
Okay.
it's, some agents, I don't see many questions because everybody's probably stunned by that, but like we're supposed to ask the buyer if they have the money to pay us or not. Personally, I think it's kind of offensive, but that being said, I mean, to get into somebody's personnel that much, but it's kind of a protection. I mean, this whole thing with who's paying who is going to be up in the air, because let's get to the really nitty gritty. I mean, if they don't have the money or they don't pay, are you really going to sue them for, take them to a superior court, because most of them are going to be over small claims actions, and really get into, paying an attorney $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 to try and recover a judgment against somebody? I don't know. So the bottom line is, I mean, the assumption is that the seller is going to pay the commission like they are now. And whatever they pay, you probably will accept. You can, internally, change the form. If you set up a deal with a buyer and say, hey, I'm getting whatever it might be, 2%, and the seller pays 1.5%, you don't necessarily have to like say to the buyer, well, you owe me a half point or else, and your financial statement said, oh, you got plenty of money after down payment and closing costs to pay me, so therefore, if I don't get it, I'm going to sue you. I mean, that's not really the best way, I don't think, to deal with a personal business that we're in. So you're gonna have to kind of play it by ear. What that form really says is if they don't have the money, which many buyers don't, that you agree that we're going to ask the seller to pay it. There's no questions asked about that. There's no questions about that. We're going to send the SPBB in and request the seller to either pay it or add it to the sales price or whatever it may be. That's kind of what the form's for, but to prove that they don't have the money before you can do that, I don't know, if that's really best practice, or practical practice. I mean, there's different ways of looking at this. It's like, a doctor says, oh, don't work for a month. Well, that's easy for him or her to say, but sometimes you have to just go to work. So same thing here. I mean, just kind of play it by ear and know that, 9 times out of 10, you're going to send in the SPBB form, and that you're gonna ask the seller to pay it or finance it or whatever the case may be, and then kind of go from there. But to get into that much personal financial, dealings so that you can get paid, is, I think, not going to be a practical way of doing business with this. But again, it's all up in the air and just gonna have to kind of see what people react to and things like that. So that's my take on that situation. There'll be other, I mean, some people are saying it's required. Yesterday we were told it was not required. And again, we'll make, it's up to Roger, I guess, if, what we want to do with that, Roger and Rusty and Kelly. So, okay.
Perfect.
Really quick, before you proceed also, because there was a question and I put a response, but I just want to put it out there to all of you. As of May 1st, corporate added a new module in Real Smart Agent. If you go to transactions, and under transactions, the newest module says buyer broker. So you would go in every time you get any of these documents signed, you'll go in, create basically your client in there and upload all of your documents. Once one of them gets under contract with you, and then there's also a way to attach those documents to the sale when the sale is created in Real Smart Agent. So that's where all the documentation will go. It'll keep it organized for you. You'll be able to look up their information by the client name, all of that. So definitely go in and take a look so you know where that will go.
Hey, Kelly, it's John. Just a quick question on that. Are we planning to do any trainings regarding, I know that sounds ridiculous and absurd, but there's a lot to it. Is Home Smart Realty West planning to offer any trainings like webinars that are like in real time to sort of guide us through how to do that? Because it's a whole level of administrative baloney that we have to do now, pardon me, but it's just a lot more that's not been part of my real estate career before. So I just want to make sure that I understand it clearly in terms of expectations and what we need to do. Is that going to be offered?
Yeah, we have a lot of different things coming up regarding all of this that will be offered, and some will be in person in the offices as well as at other larger events. But I will get in touch with you offline regarding some of that, just so that I'm clear in understanding exactly your request. But
okay, fantastic. That's awesome.
I'll give you a call after this.
Okay, thank you. Because I know I speak for everybody on the line right now, and we're all overwhelmed, and it's like there's a lot of stress and anxiety. So thank you very much.
So one of the questions in the chat was asking about non-exclusive agreement. If a buyer and you have a non-exclusive agreement, could they run off and go buy something else with someone else and you not even know? Technically the answer is yes, but I think one of the first questions you want to be asking when you're talking to a buyer is if they've signed any other agreement with anyone else. And that's kind of a key question. And then if they have, work to understand clearly what that agreement is so that you don't run into awkward or unfortunate circumstances. There's certainly buyers and sellers for that matter out there that don't realize what they're signing or think that they signed it, but they don't want it anymore. So they just in their mind have canceled it, but it's still technically a binding contract. So that's one of the first questions, you do want to be asking. Let's shift over then to the cancellation form so you can just see that, and then we'll get into the PSRA. I'm having some difficulty maneuvering documents. There was a request to lower the form on the screen. My screen is full with this, so if you're having trouble seeing the form, I apologize. That's the PRSA, and just with the buyer side, there's so many forms. Here's the cancellation of representation. And as Mark had mentioned earlier, for a non-exclusive representation agreement, it can be canceled on the spot immediately. There's no time frame. With an exclusive buyer representation agreement, there's a 30-day window unless somehow you agree otherwise and stuff. So don't necessarily need to go over this in detail. I don't think it's as complicated as the listing or the COC, cancellation of contract, of a purchase agreement, or even for that matter, the listing. It's basically just kind of canceling things out. And you move on. So let's look at that PSRA, which is only 3 pages. It says in here that you'll get the agency form filled out as soon as possible. And I think what a lot of agents are going to do is take this form or form like it and put it on some sort of electronic device so that it can almost be signed on the fly. I just, that's where I see things going. I'd seen something this morning about people doing that. And this makes it super simple and easy. It still has kind of the basic elements of the representation period, the amount of commission, and the cancellation. And then it's good for 3 properties is what the intention is. And it's a lot shorter, so it's a lot. I think there was a lot of feedback that, gosh, having to sign a BRBC and all those other documents prior to even seeing a house is just a little bit overwhelming for a buyer. And it would be a lot nicer if we had something simpler. So they were able to kind of dial it down to three pages. Anything else on this, Mark?
Yeah, so this is the BRBC Lite, so to speak. That's for 3 houses. And I think it's for a different period of time.
You're right, 30 days.
We're at 30 days.
Or less.
And I think it's exclusive to the houses, those 3 houses that you put on the list. So it becomes, it's not a non-exclusive, it becomes exclusive. And it's, you know, it's good for 30 days. And it might be easier, as you can see what it covers, because there's some questions about this earlier. It covers what the BRC is talking about, which is the compensation, right there in B1. How much is the compensation? And so that's what, you know, again, like we had talked about, this form is, we've always used it in the past more for your, you know, utilizing me as your agent. And if you see a house or you buy a for sale by owner, you still owe me compensation. And again, that was discussed before, but it was more of a secondary thought. Now it's more of the main focus. You know, they didn't make it like real big and bold and whatever, you know, because again, these forms are, you know, from California Association of Realtors, not California Association of Buyers. So these forms are still, you know, in our favor as much as possible, but compensation is the main part of this. So that's why you can use this form in lieu of the longer form. If you something other than these 3 houses, then you need the other, you know, the longer form. If you're going to be in a longer term relationship with the client, then it's better just to do the BRCC. It's like almost a difference between a SIP and a lease. You know, the SIP is 29 days and it's, you know, very short and sweet and simple, and the lease is much more complicated and much more complex. So that's the difference. But if you're going to be in a long-term relationship with the buyers, then just use the BRCC to begin with. And if not, just, you know, if you think, hey, I just want to show somebody a house, you know, you meet them on the street, hey, can you show me this, use this form right here, and that's fine.
So Mark, if the showings become more than three houses, can you just do another one of these, or should we really be shifting to the buyer representation broker compensation document?
Right. Is that a question?
It was a question.
We're not taking questions from you. Uh, yes. So again, yeah, if you really know that's only going to be a couple houses, you're showing them, or if you want to start the relationship with the client like this, that's fine. So in other words, hey, I got this little short form for you. This is what everybody's filling out. You might see people with a longer form, but for now, if we're just going to show a couple properties today, this is what we need. If we're going to, be doing this more or longer, or after the third house, you might want them to sign the longer form. If those three houses didn't meet their needs, but you guys have a relationship now after showing houses, for whatever, a few hours and stuff, and say, hey, okay, now that you saw these three, we can, if you want me to continue on, as your agent, why don't we just do this other form and get it out of the way, and we'll move on. And that's kind of an unlimited amount of houses. And you can fill out the other form that is a little more specific as to what the buyer is really looking for, and get into a little more detail and all that sort of thing. So again, these forms can be used for positive and for really getting into a longer term relationship with buyers. And don't forget, most buyers want help. They want representation, and they know that it costs something, and nobody works for free, and so on and so forth. So don't, they want help. Do they want to be stuck with you for 90 days? That might be a different story, but they are cancelable. And if you want to start with a shorter term relationship, again, one's maybe dating and one's more, the next step, engagement, type of thing, however you want to look at it in those terms. But use the forms as a positive, and explain to the buyers the same thing, which is, hey, I need a commitment from you as well. This is my commitment to you, that I'm going to do the best I can. And there's right there broker right, there's broker rights conversation, but that it's, what I'm going to do for you, and that, but you have to be, on board with me, and not be, talking to every agent in town and that sort of thing. So they can be a positive as well.
So
Did that answer your question, Bill?
well, there were several questions in there about, and comments about in the chat about
Let's see. Do you have to
only
fill out
3 properties.
forms?
I show 5 properties in at one time. I mean, I've shown 15 in a day before. And so I think the intent is, we'll start with 3, but what if it becomes more? Do I just keep filling out these forms is the question. We don't have a straight answer from CAR in terms of intention. I think in some respects, this is pure speculation, but I feel like this form was created around after seeing that Zillow 7-day touring form that came out a couple months ago, is when shortly thereafter is when this sort of started to appear. So a lot of these types of situations are, as I mentioned earlier, in flux. And I think in some respects, we need to see what the industry is going to adopt as a practice. I feel the intention of CAR is that if you're just showing 1 or 2, when you're done, fine, this works. But if you're going to be long-term with this buyer and, working weekend after weekend after weekend, you really should be filling out the BRBC. The BRBC is more robust. It has more protections. It has more things spelled out. And it's just, I think, a better way to go. And
Can I make a comment?
Commenting?
Well, and I mean, an analogy. Remember when we first had the COVID form? I can't even remember what it was called now.
The PED?
The PED.
Uh-huh.
There was a place for 1 property. And then everyone started listing like 20 properties on the PED instead of doing 20 PEDs. I kind of think of this as the same type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, these, it's going to be fluid. These will change as they actually, go into practice, because you have to understand these are written by attorneys and not necessarily, and with some agent input, but none of us know until we start really using them. And we've seen forms before, like the PED and other forms that we start out with, or the fire hardening form, our favorite form, that have changed 2 or 3 times already once we get into practice. So, yeah, you know, I mean, it will be some amount of time between August and probably the end of the year, and we'll probably rethink or we see what's going on. You know, I don't know, Bill, do we have, let's finish, because there's a lot of, there are some negative comments in the chat room about how this is working, and I don't want people to go away thinking that, you know, this could be, I mean, really, this could be almost no change at all. I mean, honestly, if it goes really well, meaning that listing agents tell the seller that, look, you used to pay us whatever, 6%, 5%, whatever, but now on my form, it's 3%. Expect another form from the other side for whatever, 2 or 3%. And, you know, that's the way it is. Instead of one form on the listing agreement saying I'm getting the whole commission, I'm going to split it with somebody. Now you're just, one form is just for me. The other form will be whatever the buyer's agent and the buyer decide, and expect to get that. You're not going to see a bunch of sellers bailing on not paying anything. I really don't see. After talking to a lot of, you know, listing agents, I've gotten that feeling that that's not what's going to happen. That's like, oh, great, I don't have to pay. They never had to pay. I mean, you guys are all listing it, but I mean, if there's people who are really specifically listing agents, Kimberly, I mean, they know they have to, they know what they're getting into, the sellers, they know they're paying, it's a fee to get to sell their house, you know, I mean, it's not free to sell your house. I mean, you have to pay for it. It's not free to sell anything. You have to pay for advertising. You have to pay for ways to get clients in. I don't care if it's a car dealership paying millions of dollars for TV ads, or Best Buy or anybody. If you're selling products, you need to spend money to get buyers to come see your product. And paying buyers agents is one way to do that. We're just doing it in a different format. The seller, more than likely, and I know a lot of people are making a big deal about not being able to see what the seller is going to pay. Oh, well, so what? Make an offer. I mean, you're going to negotiate this with your buyer. You're going to say, hey, I deserve $10,000 or 2% or whatever you come up with, because I'm going to do all this stuff. And don't worry, more than likely, we're going to get the seller, you know, it's kind of baked into the sales price already, I'm sure. We're going to send this form in. And that's the end of it. It may be as simple as that. It may be as simple as a quick conversation with the buyer saying that, hey, we're going to look at houses together. This is how much I get paid. Yeah, legally you're responsible for it, but more than likely the seller's going to pay just like they always have. And let's go out and look at houses. And that's the end of it. You know, it's just 2 forms now instead of 1. Listing agreement and an SPBB, where it used to be just the listing agreement. Could be as simple as that. So I don't want everybody to get into, you know, well, they're getting rid of buyer's agents, or they're doing this or doing that. Might be true, I don't know. But for the time being, I think starting in August, if everybody just keeps it simple, don't worry about what they will or won't pay. Don't get into a tizzy about, it's not, you know, I don't know what they're paying. I got to call every agent and ask them. Who cares? None of it's binding because it's not in the MLS. So if an agent says, oh, I think the seller's going to pay 2%, and then you send your SPPB in for it comes back at 1%, there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, it is what it is. So just negotiate with your buyer how much you deserve as compensation, and that the seller probably is going to end up paying for it or putting in the sales price or whatever, and move on. That's it. Don't make a big deal out of it. You can't see, you know, what the compensation is, because it doesn't, it is what it is. I mean, the same thing, even if you know, as agents, how many times you as a buyer's agent or a listing agent have compensation at a certain percentage, and as the deal goes on, hey, to make this deal work, we take a half point off, or I take a half point off, or we contribute to the seller. But it's not set in stone. So I mean, it's always in flux. and it depends on the offer. So if there's 2% compensation in MLS, sometimes you end up getting 1.5%. We know that. So don't get into a big ordeal about that. I don't think. I think it's just, negotiated based on the sales price and the whole transaction. Same thing, if a house is listed at $1 million and you offer $1,050,000 with a $20,000 compensation, you're probably gonna get paid. If the house is listed at $1 million and you offer $800,000 with a $20,000 compensation, you're probably not gonna get paid. I mean, it just really depends on the offers. And listing agents I've talked to are saying, yeah, just send them in and we'll present it just like any other offer. So I see a lot of, again, negative stuff going through the chat room. Okay, that's my speech. Kelly, back to you. Kelly, back to you.
Yeah, I have just two things. Back to the showings, and the difference, with the BRBC, do you use this? Do you use the other? If your standard practice when you're working with buyers is to show, 5 at least, go on based on your current business that you do now. If you have a standard practice, then go with the BRBC, which also has a little more teeth in it. But and as Mark stated, if you're going to just show 1 or 2, then go with the other. But I just want to make that sort of clear that you don't, go with what your standard practice is. And we get that there might be, changes and you might have some unusual circumstances. So don't overthink that. Feels like there's a little bit of overthinking going there. The other thing, I just want to make just to piggyback on what Mark just said about buyers agents, you are needed. Buyers need you probably now more than ever, to navigate this. So you got to just sort of change. Yes, there's changes coming, and yes, negotiations are going to look a little bit different. But again, this is fluid. And remember, and this is what I have been saying for months, is take a look. What is it? What's your value you're bringing to the table to those buyers? Sit down, write down everything you do as a buyer's agent in the middle of a transaction. So you're able to eloquently express your value to your client. Because there's a lot that some of you probably have not thought about that you do during the course of the transaction that is really needed by that buyer. And to be honest, the listing agent, they want that buyer represented too. They want, and they're able to express that to their clients as well. You're going to get more showings. You're going to have a cleaner transaction, fewer hiccups, all of that. So you're worth it, and just learn how to express it and articulate your value.
Hey, Kelly, I just want to echo that real fast. One real, very, very important document that everyone should be using. NAR put out it's kind of a white paper, 105 more ways agents who are realtors are worth every penny of their compensation. Go to the NAR website, find it, download it, and study it, because I can't tell you how many times I convinced buyers of my value because there's 105 ways on there. So it's already written out. So I just wanted to echo that real fast.
Right. And really start thinking of yourselves the way attorneys think of themselves. In other words, you wouldn't go, not to be negative, you wouldn't get a divorce and necessarily go in without an attorney. And you wouldn't get a divorce and use your husband's or wife's attorney just because it saves you a few bucks. It's going to cost you money in the long run. So you don't use the same, meaning the listing agent. So think in terms more that your value is much greater than just a salesperson or whatever. And that, attorneys, you have that, you're licensed, you're experienced, you have a certain amount of expertise that will, and now we're talking about the median price is $1 million. So now you got, you're working with an 18-page contract valued at over $1 million with 20 other forms coming in as far as disclosures and reports and requests for repairs and appraisal and loan. I mean, there's a lot of money involved here. And if I can't justify that I'm not worth $10,000 or $15,000 to somebody because you're dealing with a multi-million-dollar product, and I'm not, if I was in whatever, Spodunk, Iowa, and selling houses for 200 grand, different story. That's a little more of an issue, I'm sure there. But here, we're dealing with mostly million and up. Somebody said the other day, she goes, well, I'm not dealing with the really high end stuff, just like 800, 900,000. Like in the old days, that was high end. Not that long ago, that was a big deal. In most places, that is a big deal. But here it's like 800, 900 is like a whatever, a track house in Vista or San Marcos or whatever. So think of your worth as being much more than it has been in the past, because you're dealing with much higher dollar amounts and much higher liability for the seller and the buyer. Believe me, if the seller knew the liability involved in an agent doing dual agency, they wouldn't let the agent do it. There's a lot more liability for the seller on those transactions. So that's not. I don't think there's going to be tons of dual agencies. I don't think there's going to be. There'll be some people that don't want to be represented at all. But I think if everybody just kind of goes in with the going to be the same as it was before, just some more paperwork, then and that my value is really great and people really need me and want me, everything will be fine.
One of the things Gov Hutchinson talked about in the town hall yesterday was that the newer agents who are just kind of learning all this stuff, they're totally fine with this. The ones that are, having difficulty are the ones that have been in the industry for a little while. And so I kind of go back to what we started with in terms of change. I mean, that's why those quotes were there is, it is a change, and the quicker and sooner we can adapt to it, the better off we're going to be. There was a question in the chat from Mark Waters asking about what happens if there's the seller's willing to pay less than what has been agreed to in the buyer representation agreement. And this gets into where we were going as it relates to modification of terms to the buyer representation agreement. You have the option. I'm not saying you have to, but if there is a gap between what the seller is offering and what was agreed to in the buyer representation agreement, you're either going to pursue the buyer for the difference, or you can modify the terms to the buyer representation agreement to adjust the commission to be commensurate with what's being offered by the seller. So hopefully, Mark, that answers the question that you had in the chat there. And that's part of where we were going to go is, let me go back to where things were, is some of the other forms that
Bill, can I ask a question real quick?
Judy hit it. We're getting the questions anyway, so why not?
If we put 2.5% for commission, can we still exceed that in the request for repairs? Or it is total concession of 2.5%? Obviously, it's negotiated, but could we, in addition, request repairs?
Bill, go ahead.
So this ties into another question that was asked in relationship to concessions and lender and all that kind of stuff. And we'll get into the RPA because you're kind of touching into the RPA a little bit, but we've had this paragraph in the RPA for some time, and it's paragraph 3G3 that attaches the seller payment to buyer broker form to the RPA. And so from the lender standpoint, that's a completely separate action compared to the concessions that are found in a different section of the RPA, or a credit that's provided through an amendment that's driven by the request for repairs. So they don't have to be commingled, and that's where it's advantageous to use that 3G3 over just a general seller concession of X number of dollars for closing costs, some of which can be divvied up for the benefit of the buyer's agent commission. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, but there still is some limitations with certain loan products as it relates to closing cost concessions. But
Yes,
again, as I understand it, the
that is,
buyer agent commission, if it's separated out through 3G3, is not part of that percentage contemplation.
that is correct. Yeah, so if a loan, a conventional loan is 6% concession, then it's just concession, it's not the commission. It's separate. And again, the same thing, like I was saying before, I mean, if you had a repair request, you want the deal to get done, adjust your commission. I mean, I've done it, everybody's done it. So it's like, whatever, then that hasn't changed. The only change is that the commission amount is not decided by the listing agent. Okay, you guys understand that where the commission comes from. If I asked for a show of hands, who pays you? I mean, what would people say? I mean, I'll make it easy. It's the listing agent pays you. You don't get paid from escrow. You don't get paid from the seller. You get paid by the listing side. The listing agent decides how much you get paid right now, right? I mean, everybody agrees on that. The listing agent goes to the seller, says, hey, Mr. Seller, I want, 5% to sell your house. I'm going to take 3% and give 2% to the buyer because I do more work than they do, and that's that. Yeah, fine, I don't care. There you go. So the listing agent just decided how much you get paid. That's not the case anymore. Now the case is you will decide with your buyer how much you deserve to get paid, and you ask the seller to pay it. So, and then during the transaction, if that changes, so be it. It changes. It always has. Nobody's, I've conceded more than one time, $500, $1,000, 0.5%, whatever, to get the deal done. Something's better, in my opinion, something's better than nothing. And over the years, it works out. I mean, it's, that's just the way business is and sales and, that sort of thing.
So just looking at some additional forms, we had looked at the BFPI, we looked at the BIPP. There's this notice to broker involved properties, which is tied to the cancellation. We talked a little bit about this. And this would be properties in which, as a part of a cancellation or something, you're making basically a claim that, look, I was involved in this property. I showed this buyer this property, that kind of thing. And you then provide this to the buyer who's canceling, or the buyer whose BRBC or PSRA has expired, it's run its term. Notice at the bottom that it's a notice. So the buyer doesn't have to assign, they don't have to agree to it, but it's something that we need to put in writing to put them on notice that if they turn around after our agreement has expired and go buy this property within a certain amount of time, contemplated in either the agreement, like if they cancel, or in the BRBC for that continuation period, that you would be entitled to compensation. So that's that form. And then there was this other one that has been around for a while. It's the buyer material issues. We don't really use it, but it's mentioned in the BRBC, and it might be something that becomes more important where the buyer is just going to disclose on a specific property what some of their concerns might be, so that as a part of the escrow process, a due diligence process during escrow, we make sure that gets explored. So that was another form that's called out in the BRBC that we're not necessarily totally familiar with. And then there's a couple others. We looked at the modification of terms, and then there's also, similar to the listing agreements that are pre-July 2024, there's a disclosure of modification to the buyer representation agreement in the event that you have one in place that was created prior to the revision coming out. You can use that DMBR for that. And we already looked at the cancellation. And so we are on to questions. I don't know if we have enough time we might, Kelly, need to print out like you've always talked about before.
Well, no, we're not doing questions. We're
Copy
doing
the questions and then answer them offline.
Yeah, no, we're gonna have a test, and we want to see if everybody knows all those acronyms by heart now. The DTMP and the BRCC and the ABC and the SPBB, right? No? Okay, we'll wait. Don't worry, Bill and I don't know them all either, so. It will take us all some time to kind of get used to this, so everybody have patience and, you know, that's basically it. And then we'll do some best practices stuff on Friday, right?
But we'll do our best. I mean, candidly, guys, this is a struggle for us too. It's all just this quick sprint to try to understand and then try to explain it. And it's tough. And I think as we start applying this stuff and you know, exercise a certain amount of patience, it's going to be okay. Like Ed Zorn had said, but it's just going to take a little while. And understand also that every brokerage that's paying attention to all of this, they're going through the same conversations. And so anyway, they're going through the same conversations, and so everybody's in the same boat. The thing to applaud you guys about is that you're here, you're learning about this, you're going to be well versed in it compared to, candidly, probably 80% or more of the agents out there. And so you'll have confidence in doing what we're doing and not allow another agent on the other side of the transaction to take you down a rabbit hole and get the whole transaction muddled and lost because they weren't doing things correctly. So
I have a question, if I could may, please.
sure.
On the disclosure modification to listing agreement. So I already have the listing. We have a commission split, and that's on the MLS, and I know as of 17th, that's going to change. So we're going to be in escrow, hopefully by then, or not, or we will go in after that. So what do I need to do on the modification? Do I change it to that we're not going to reduce the price, or what exactly will happen? The seller is already aware of this change. I've explained to them this is coming up, and they are going to be paying the commission that we agreed on. As far as right now, that's going to happen. So what's the step I need to take? So do I modify the listing, or do I just leave it as it is?
So we're shifting to listing agreement, which is totally fine. We talked about this on Monday. And
I
what I'm trying to
apologize.
pull up,
I didn't verify that.
no, it's all good. What I'm trying to say is that this is part of what's relevant to our discussion. I don't want to get into purchase agreement stuff because we haven't gone over that yet, but let me see if I can find the DM real quick. It's the buyer representation, disclosure modification to listing agreement. And I got to go back to share screen real quick. This will look messy, but let's see. Are we seeing?
There we go.
My computer is slowing down. It's like, okay, I've had enough of this. I'm gonna overheat. I can't get it to pull down below the desktop right now. But basically, paragraph 2 says that this modifies the listing agreement to remove the amount of commission that's was contemplated as being shared in the listing agreement right here.
Mm-hmm.
That's all you need to do. And so that will then remove whatever you were going to be sharing, and it's going to come out of the MLS automatically. And then you're probably going to end up going with the paragraph 3G3, where the buyer's asking for some.
We're still not understanding, so I apologize. So seller and broker agree that the total compensation shall or shall not be reduced by the amount that's authorized to be offered in the MLS. What exactly does that mean?
It means kind of what you read. I mean, don't say shall not unless you're checking that
It's
box.
either or shall not.
Right, so you're not going to check the box. The default is that the total compensation will be reduced by the amount authorized to be offered. So in the original listing agreement, paragraph 3D, as in dog, shows how much you are going to be able to share with the buyer broker. And it's removing 3D from the listing agreement and subtracting it from, I think it's 3A, which was your total commission. So if your total commission was X and your offering to the buyer agent was Y, is going X minus Y equals now what the commission is once you have filled out this modification. If I needed to use numbers, 5, 2.5, 5 minus 2.5, your commission is now modified to 2.5 going to the listing side.
Okay,
That
so
make sense?
that makes sense. So do I have a different addendum regarding that they are offering the 2.5% or whatever they're offering? And they'll continue to offer that to the buyer's broker.
No, you're
So-
not. We're not doing broker sharing anymore. That's the whole message.
Okay. So, okay, so with this, so
So
they
what you're
made,
waiting for is the buyer broker through the RPA to request a concession from the seller
got you.
as a part of
Okay.
their offer. Now,
Okay.
you had mentioned hopefully you'll be in escrow. If you get into escrow,
Well, I'm in
prior-
I'm in a contract situation right now, so we haven't hit the 17th yet, but some of the offers that I'm getting they have
13th.
that, some don't.
it won't be the 17th though. It'll be either the 12th if you're with San Diego MLS, or it'll be the 13th if you're with CRMLS, in
Okay.
which the commission sharing on the MLS is removed. And so if
Okay.
you're in escrow
If it-
prior to those dates, you're grandfathered in. The agreement that was in the MLS for commission sharing still stands. But if you're not in escrow, you will need to do the modification that I described on that
Perfect.
Right. The
EMLA
key,
form.
the key to
Okay.
using current forms or.
Yeah, we listed it, that's the whole thing, we listed it a couple of few weeks ago before, I mean, using current
Right, yeah,
form
well,
was at the
current forms
time.
meaning,
Yeah.
that's why I stopped, is like the current form shows 0. The key to using any form before the 12th or the 13th is, as long as the compensation is still shown in the MLS, which will be up until the 12th or the 13th, so the
Okay.
next week or 10 day, then everything stays the same.
Mhm,
The
okay.
key is when they take the compensation out of the MLS, that's when everything changes. Up until
Okay.
then, if you're in escrow, it doesn't have to close, just has to be in escrow by that date, showing the MLS compensation, then you're fine with what we have. After
Okay.
they take it out, that's when everything changes, whatever date
Gotcha.
that might be, okay?
All
Some
right.
places it's the 17th, the 12th, the 13th, the 7th, no later than the 17th.
Right,
Mhm.
somehow I had the 17 is when everything comes down.
Right, so as long as the compensation is still in the MLS, everything remains the same. The
Okay.
day that it takes it, that you wake up in the morning and there's no compensation anymore, that's when all the new stuff starts, because you're gonna have to get
Okay.
the compensation from, negotiate with the buyer and then ask for the seller to pay.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Good.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm on overtime already, 11:34.
So I wanted to
I-
touch on something though, Mark. Sharon has a kind of comment
Okay,
regarding modification of compensation. It came in at 11:20, if you're looking.
okay, then that's
She's
allowed.
asking, don't we put our own financial means above our duty to our client? And I feel like this gets
Oh,
back
so-
to what you introduced in the beginning of this session related to agency. Did you want to touch on that?
Yeah, basically, your duty is to find the best deal for the best transaction for your client. That is your fiduciary responsibility as being a licensed realtor. That's it. That's what that disclosure says. Okay, you're as same agent as, if Michael Jordan was your client, you have the same agency fiduciary responsibility to do what's best for your client, not for you. whatever that might be. Now, nobody wants to work for free, and you can certainly say, hey, if they're not paying me or you're not paying me, then I'll find another client. You don't have to work for free. There's no law that says that. But, holding up the transaction, not reducing your compensation. It's, whatever you have to do to get the deal done. You don't have to do it. I mean, it's no law that says you have to take, if you've agreed to a certain amount and everybody's agreed to it contractually, you don't have to change that. It would be wise more times than not to change it, because I'm a big fan of something's better than nothing. And doing a favor for your client always pays dividends in the long run. I've never had a client that I reduced the compensation to me to get the deal done that has not referred me 1 or 2 people, that I made 10 times as much as what I gave up ever. I've been doing this a long time. So, if it is what it is, it's up to you. You don't have to do the reduction during the transaction, but that means the transaction blows up, you lose the client, you get paid 0. I don't understand the point of that. So, but to each their own. There's no laws. You're all independent contractors and can run your business any way you'd like.
Thank you. And no, guys, that we've tried to answer everything in the chat. If we've missed it, Kelly, if you
missed it, Bill's going to put in his personal cell number at the end. Just call him anytime.
Actually, you can call broker support because Mark's on all week.
Broker support. I'm here. I'm on broker support today.
You guys have my personal cell phone number anyway, so.
But anyway, yes, just feel free.
So I have put my email address in the chat, but I'll say it now. So if you have any questions, just send them to me, and then I will disseminate them out to Bill and Mark.
Right.
Anyway,
or email broker support.
Or you can email broker support. I was just trying to give one email address. Anyway, so it's kportman@homesmartsd.com. But I will give broker support's email too if you want to go direct to them. It is broker support at homesmartsd.com as well. So get your questions to any of us, and we'll get you some answers. Thank you all for being here. We will again get the recording out to you. Hopefully sometimes Zoom holds us up because we don't necessarily always get the recording in a really timely fashion. So
don't forget Friday 10 o'clock.
Friday 10 o'clock. Yes. But we'll try to get today's recording out to you today. Otherwise it will be out to you no later than tomorrow. That way, if you want to go back and catch some information, anybody too that had to get off, we'll have it ahead of time before Friday. Oh, one other thing too, because I got several emails and text messages prior to this one starting. Each session has its own meeting ID number. So in fact, we had someone fully log into the one from Monday. Anyway, so just be careful if you've registered for all 3 already, then you should have received a Zoom registration verification that gives the passcode and the meeting ID for each part, and they're parts 1, 2, and 3. And don't forget, the passcode is in all caps, training. That part's the same. Thank you all for being here and taking the time to invest in your business and becoming more knowledgeable about all of this. And we're learning as we go. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Bill.